Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Weekend Wellness Hour show. Today, we are going to be talking about boundaries, and we have psychotherapist Dana Skaggs on, who I met just a couple months ago when I was interviewed on her podcast, Phoenix and Flame, and we hit it off. We had a great conversation. We even chatted afterwards, and so I really wanted to bring her on because she has wonderful information about the topic of boundaries. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dana.
I am very excited. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Anything with mental health and telling people no, how can you not have fun, right?
That's true.
So, how did you even get into this world of mental health and boundaries and all that?
Oh, wow. So I actually started out in physical therapy.
Wow.
And I know I wasn't a physical therapist. I was in training to be one, totally rejected from the program. And I was just like, one of those moments when you think, well, what I still stand to this day. That's a wonderful choice to do. Being a physical therapist is awesome. But it just wasn't for me. And I ended up in psychology because it just kind of came to me naturally. And looking back now, I feel like that it came naturally because I happened to have been raised in a situation where my mother had several fairly significant mental illnesses, and I had to weather those, and I had to learn. I was like in a master class of boundaries and didn't even know it, just because that's the only way you can survive that kind of situation. But looking back now, I feel like what I was trying to do was I was trying to learn how to, if I could just dismantle, if I could deconstruct what she was doing and why, I could somehow protect myself. If I could see it coming ahead of time, then I could defend myself and be ready for it. And I didn't know that at the time. I mean, you're just living life, right? You're just kind of going through childhood. I mean, to be honest, most of us survived childhood. Let's just be honest about that. So it's kind of like by the time I got into college, psychology courses were just like no brainers for me. It's like somebody asked me how to spell cat. It's like,
Wow.
yeah, so I just kept following that through and just kind of ended up in psychotherapy. And it's just amazing.
So it sounds like a lot of your learning was your practice with dealing with your mom, and then it probably was nice to take some courses to make sense of, oh yeah, that's why I responded this way. This is why I developed this technique, and then I imagine also you're learning how to help other people as well, so that
Yeah.
they can manage their situation.
Well, it gives you a lot of empathy when you feel like that you've been there. I'm certainly not in any kind of ivory tower, glass house, pick your analogy. It's just when you've been in the trenches and you feel like you can relate to the person. It's just like you look straight across at them and you're like, okay, we're all people. I have patients that come in, but we're all just people trying to find our way. And I just happen to know a few things. I just happen to have some education and some background that I can maybe look back and help someone else, traverse some dangerous ground that I've already been through.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all just helping one another.
Yeah. And so then what type of settings have you worked in? Is it because right now you have your own practice, but have
Mhm.
you always had your own practice, or have you worked in other situations?
No, I started out in community mental health when I first graduated and worked in community mental health for about 7 years or so. I did, school testing, where you would do special education testing in school systems to determine if they have learning disabilities or if they're gifted or whatever like that. That required IQ testing and achievement testing and all of that, and writing the reports. Did all that in about 7 different school systems. Did evaluations for disability individuals. There's one. Can I tell a funny story about that? There was this one guy that came in and his chart from disability was really fat. And so I went out into the waiting area to get him, and he just comes stomping up to me. And he was like so close to my face. He was so close to my face that my vision was blurred. And I just sort of stood there and looked at him with my blurred vision.
Yeah.
And then his little wife kind of came up behind him. She was kind of timid and was like, putting her fingers together and stuff. And I took him back in the back and he kept trying to intimidate me, just like, whatever, dude. So we're walking down the hallway and we go through all this testing. And of course, disability wanted tons of testing done with this guy. What took me like over 3 hours to do all the testing, a Rorschach, the ink blot test. I know how to do that. And an IQ test and all this kind of stuff, because they wanted to know how he could function in all these different ways. And he just kept trying to intimidate me. And I just sort of kept just ignoring him and keep going. And he was getting ready to leave the room and he walked right beside me and had his hand on the doorknob, and he looked down at me. He goes, "You know what?" And I had no idea what he was getting ready to say. He could have said anything. I said, "What?" He goes, "You're very disarming." Like, okay, have a good day.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was some of that. So, and that, the community mental health, basically I did neuropsychology. I worked in a rehab units where I basically was the psychology department. And worked with a physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech and language, pathologists, all people. We would sit together and talk about all the different aspects of patients before they had to be discharged, and did the testing and counseling and all kinds of stuff, and ended up in private practice eventually.
That's great. And so this whole time, did you focus on boundaries because you saw so many people didn't know how to set them? Or is that something that's kind of come to the forefront, in the past few years?
The latter. It was always inside of me because I had to do it to function, but I wasn't really aware of it. And so doing school testing, that really isn't a thing.
Yeah.
And then community mental health testing for disability, that's not really a thing. When I was doing neuropsychology, it's not really that much of a thing. But when I started psychotherapy on my own private practice, and I started seeing people, and it just started coming up more and more and more, because I would start really kind of helping each patient deconstruct their situation so we could figure out where the trouble spots were. And it just came more and more and more obvious how absolutely prevalent and pervasive boundary issues are. They are at the core of the vast majority of issues, especially relational issues.
Got it. And so why don't we dive into that a little bit more? What do you mean by boundaries? Like, what does that show up as?
Okay. So boundaries is basically knowing where you stop and the other person starts, which when we are in abusive situations growing up, our boundaries are crossed a lot of the time, where we're told you can't feel that way, or you can't think that, or sometimes our physical skin is violated in sexual abuse and that kind of stuff, where that's not respected by other people. So depending on what kind of abuse people have gone through growing up, they come into adulthood not really understanding what rights they have, that they have a right to their own thoughts, their own feelings, and their own choices of their behavior. And what they don't have to own is other people's thoughts, other people's feelings, and other people's actions. And so if you think in terms of yards, like the first 4 episodes of my podcast are nothing but boundaries, just explaining all the ins and outs. And if you think of it as a yard, and with like a fence around it, and in your yard are your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, which you have to take responsibility for. Okay. What is not in your yard are your neighbor's thoughts, your neighbor's feelings, and your neighbor's choices. And so that is a basic kind of premise of what boundaries mean.
Got it. So then when you start working with someone and they don't have these clear boundaries, how do you approach working with them and teaching them about boundaries? Because I can imagine that's very overwhelming. Let's say you don't set any boundaries at all. How do you even get someone to start thinking about boundaries and setting them?
Well, usually when I have people come in that make comments like, "I'm just trying to keep the peace, Dana."
Yeah.
Okay. That right there, ding, 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 ding. That's a boundary issue because you cannot keep someone else's peace. Right. Someone else's peace is technically in their brain. That's a feeling they have, and you cannot have access to that. You don't have access to their brain. And so when they make a comment like that, or when they say, well, I'm just a people pleaser. I wish I had a gong in my office. I go gong.
Yeah.
I've trained my patients to now, when they've been working with me for a while, they'll say, I am a recovering people pleaser. I'm like, yes, I give them high fives. Because to sit there and say, I am something, I am a people pleaser, that's in essence saying, I have no intention of changing. It's just who I am. It's in my DNA. And I'm like, no, that is a behavior pattern. That's all that is. And you have that pattern because of how you were raised and different coping strategies that you developed along the way that weren't particularly healthy, but you were just doing the best that you could. Mm-hmm. And so now you're an adult and you have these patterns that are dysfunctional. So in terms of being, is it wrong? Is it, a wrong thing to try to please someone? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. But if you have a habit of feeling like everyone around you has to be okay, mm-hmm. they have to be pleased, or you're going to be upset. And yes. Your goal is to keep everybody happy. And if they're not happy, you can't be happy. Well, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
You see,
it gets out of what's the word? It can get blown up very quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone is people pleasing and not really setting boundaries, I imagine awareness is one of the big steps to getting started to change. Is there anything that you would tell them, okay, here's what you need to do to pause so you actually set some boundaries?
Okay. Yeah. So let's start with, like you said, with the people pleaser. Yeah. So I kind of talk through them. I pick one person. I say, well, just explain your situation. Who's the main person in your life that you really feel like you have to please? Let's just break it down, because what we're talking about is a sort of a division of anxiety. Mm-hmm. And anxiety wants to take a situation and blow it up into some big, huge, amorphous fog that you feel like you can't find the handle anywhere, but you're lost and you're stumbling around this fog and you can't find the handle. So one of the ways of dealing with that is to bring it down into a specific example. Okay. So I would say, okay, tell me one person, pick one person in your life that for you feel like you have to please the most, that gives you the most anxiety. Just thinking about that person right now, you're feeling a little tense, your body's getting a little tight. Just thinking about them not being happy and wanting them to be happy with you. And so I get them to identify one person, and then I just kind of talk it through them. Can you give me an example? Like, give me a conversation that you've had just recently with them where you felt like they weren't happy and you were upset about that. So I kind of just walk with them in that situation, so I can hold their hand to be there with them in it. And I help them to see the difference between what they're thinking and what the other person is thinking, because there's a line there. We can't control how someone's going to receive what we say, nor can we control how they're going to respond.
Right. That's very true.
That's not, and so I just kind of walk them through that step by step.
And is that how you help people kind of alleviate some of the fears of pissing someone off or getting someone angry at them? Because there are times there's a fear that prevents someone from setting a boundary. That if I set this boundary, oh my gosh, it's going to make them mad, or they won't work with me. If it's in the work situation, is it just walking through that process that helps them, or is there anything else that someone should consider?
Well, there's a lot. There's teaching. So I walk with them so I gain a better understanding. And then I start teaching. I start helping them understand. For example, we use the phrase all the time, you made me mad, or I made them mad. Technically, that's not possible. What happens is I did this kind of thing, and then you responded with anger. Mm-hmm. Okay. Or you said such and such to me, and I responded with anger. Mm-hmm. You didn't make me any kind of way. I didn't make you any kind of way. There's a line there, but we use that all the time. So when you're talking about a work situation, there's a fear of making somebody angry. And this is you give very good examples, because this is absolutely legit. We're so afraid of somebody getting mad at us. So the first step is, okay, do I feel like what I'm doing is a good choice? So I walk with them and I say, you need to take some time and feel comfortable. Maybe seek some guidance of some learned, wise friends or coworkers, so you feel comfortable that what you're getting ready to do is a good choice. It's a healthy choice. Okay. So you need to feel good about that first, because they're going to attack it. All right. So you need to feel comfortable that you've thought it all through and you know that what you're going to do is a good choice. So when you go in there and they react with anger, okay, I'm like, all right. So I tell my patients, we're in the room, I said, you know what, right now I could start screaming right now at you if I wanted to. Right. I mean, I could talk really loud. I could look at you with a snarl. I could use tone. And I said, what, all that stuff, just break the anger down into pieces. Again, deconstruct the anger. What is it really? The other person doesn't like what you're doing for some kind of reason. Sorry about that.
No
They don't usually, when you're dealing with boundary issues like that, other people are benefiting from your lack of boundaries. And so when you start setting boundaries, they don't respond well. They don't like it because they were benefiting from that. So it's kind of part of setting boundaries is understanding that people are going to get upset with you. Okay. And one of the words that I use is, and I'm sorry. So see, I'm a very transparent person. So I have my phone set so that when my kids call, it gets past my do not disturb and he keeps calling me. So I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. Boundaries.
I know. It's just like, so it's like, if somebody, I'm scared they're going to get mad. Okay. What are you scared of? Some people are scared legitimately of being hit. I mean, I address that in some of my podcast episodes. I mean, you have to break it down. If he gets mad or she gets mad, I'm going to be attacked. Well, that's a different animal. Okay. Yeah. That's a different animal. That's not what I'm talking about right now. So if someone is just going to be mad at you, they're not going to physically abuse you or anything like that, but they're just angry. Well, okay. So what? They're going to raise their voice at you. Okay. And well, that's going to make me uncomfortable. Yes, it will. And well, he'll be mad. Yes, he will. And well, he'll yell. Yes, he will. And what?
Yeah.
You know, I keep having them, it's like turning the page. I've said like anxiety sort of like wants to take you to the middle of what are those stories like with Rapunzel and Cinderella and Snow White, the fairy tales. Yeah. What anxiety wants to do is to take you right in the middle of one of those and ice you down and freeze you. And what I say is keep turning the page. Keep turning the page by using the word and. Well, he's going to get upset. Yes, he will. Let's be truthful about that. And what? We have to face it. We can't run away from it. We can't act like it's not going to happen. We can't deny it because a part of our brain knows you're lying. You know, he's going to get mad. Stop acting like he's not going to get mad. You know, he's going to get mad. So just face it. Yeah, he's going to get mad. And
exactly.
What?
We stop when we think he's going to get mad. We stop.
Turn the page. And you can do that with anybody. And yes, you will be uncomfortable. There's something else I teach my patients. Learn to sit in discomfort. Stop running away from it. Stop trying to avoid it. You can sit in the discomfort and it will begin to slowly fade away. A lot like when you go to sit in a pool after you've been in the sun for a while and your skin is nice and hot, but you're too hot. You know, you want cooled off, but you go get in that pool and it's so cold. The water feels so cold. But the longer you sit in it, the more regular, the more normal the water feels. It doesn't maintain that same coldness on your skin. You habituate, you get used to it. So when you know that you don't have to be afraid of discomfort, yes, you will be uncomfortable when someone's mad at you. Your heart rate may speed up. It probably will. You might get a little moist in the pits. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's going to happen. You might feel a little weird, like your face is doing some kind of weird thing. You might feel like you're getting blotches. Okay. That's your body responding. There's been extra adrenaline dumped into your system. It's trying to kick you into fight or flight. Use some deep breathing. Just calm yourself down. let your body do what it needs to do to work out that extra adrenaline. Don't take it personal. It's your body doing its thing. And while it's doing that, the discomfort will slowly begin to fade. You don't have to run away from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing when you implement some of these tactics that you can shift yourself and you can learn from your discomfort, learn from being in it, and realize it's not the end of the world being uncomfortable.
No, and you get a lot of power from that, because then no one can lord that over you, that all they have to do is make you a little uncomfortable to get you to do what they want.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
Yeah. That's a good point.
So if you're uncomfortable, so what? And what? So your heart's beating fast? Yes, it is. And well, I'm getting sweaty. My pits are getting sweaty. Yes, they are. And what?
Yeah. Very true.
Well,
so when we are discussing boundaries, we kind of talked about people pleasing and kind of this fear. Are there other situations where people have their boundaries not set well that show up?
Gosh, so many places. I'm trying to think. Okay, here's one. Like in friendships or any kind of relationship, but I'll give you an example. Like, let's say you and a friend are you're shopping together, and it's about time to eat. And so you're like, hey, would you like to go to this restaurant down there? I've been wanting to try it. You want to hang out, check out their food? And your friend goes, sure, let's go. So you go in there and you eat. Then you find out a couple weeks later that your friend did not want to go to that restaurant, but they went there trying to please you because they knew you wanted to go, but they really didn't want to go, but they didn't want to tell you that they didn't want to go. So it's kind of like, when you figure that out, then when you're with that friend next time, then how are you going to believe that if you say, hey, you want to go to this restaurant, or you want to go shopping here, or you want to go travel there, and they say yes, you're wondering, do they really?
Yeah.
Do they really want to go? Or are they just saying that to please me? It doesn't work well on either end.
No, and I can see how that would lead to distrust. And it brings like a barrier into the friendship then too.
Yes. Because you're like, what are you gonna, it doesn't work on either side. People think that when they're doing people pleasing, that they're doing the other person a favor. No, you're not.
Yeah.
It's a form of being dishonest, and you're doing it usually out of fear. And it's like a sort of a distortion of kindness, but it's not. If you're not being honest, then the other person is eventually going to find out, more than likely. And when they do, they're going to wonder moving forward, okay, well, are you just people pleasing me, or is this how you really feel?
Yeah. It's almost, if we could just learn to be a little bit more honest and forthright and just say, you know what, I really don't want to go to that restaurant. Maybe I'm not hungry, or I'd prefer going somewhere else. I will go with you if that's where you really want to go, but just so you know, it's not my favorite place.
Exactly. Yeah. See, that wasn't confrontational. That's what a lot of people pleasers fear. They think any time that they tell the truth or they stand up for themselves, they think it's some big hoo-ha confrontation. And it's not. I mean, some of the most calm and peaceful people I know are the ones that have very good understanding of their boundaries, because they know exactly where they stop and where you start. They don't take responsibility for your feelings. They don't personalize whatever you say or do. They don't make it about them. And so they're just calm. And it's kind of like, there's no reason to get upset or to yell or fuss or cause a big kerfuffle, because why? Everybody has a right to their own opinions.
Right. Is personalization of someone else's words, is that kind of a sign as well that your boundaries are not as strong as you'd like them to be?
Yes, because it's sort of like their stuff is their stuff. Everybody's got issues, right?
Right.
So their issues are not yours. So let's say if your neighbor, I'm trying to come up with like an analogy. If your neighbor over there paints her house purple, okay, and you're like, she's doing that on purpose because we had an argument the other day and she's painting her house purple because she's trying to reduce the value of my home because I'm right next to her, and she's doing that because of me. She's trying to do that to get back at me. Okay, well, even if that was her motivation, that's not in your yard.
Yeah.
It's her behavior, it's her thoughts, it's her motivation. If she is that kind of, let's say, emotionally unstable, that she's going to take an argument and paint her house purple to get back at you, okay, don't make that about you. That's her issue. I think we all have enough of our own without having to make other people's stuff ours.
Yeah. So when someone's boundaries are kind of violated, or they're not taking care of setting their own boundaries, how does that show up in our health or mental health? Does it affect us in a certain way, certain patterns, or is it different for everyone?
Well, you can see overarching patterns. Obviously, personalities are going to make things change.
Okay.
If you have someone who's particularly like aggressive and abrasive, and they're trying to work on that, versus someone who seems to be more timid and they're trying to work on that. But basically, so you've got your yard, which are your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, and then you've got the other person's. So it's learning the difference. There was a quote, and this kind of getting back to personalizing for just a second, but Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the Four Agreements, there's a quote that he said, there's a great amount of freedom that happens when you take nothing personally. And I'm like, that's wonderful. And so, when you see these lack of boundaries play out, basically, if someone feels like they don't have a right to their own feelings, okay, well, I feel this kind of way, but they're like trying to tamp them down because someone else doesn't like their feelings. Or here's a big issue: when people don't want to communicate how they feel, because that's another part of boundaries, is speaking what's on your mind, because other people cannot read your mind, and it is not their job to ferret out when something is wrong with you. I always said, whoever holds the upset is the one who's responsible for attaching words to it and communicating it. So there's something that I call a boomerang issue. So most of us, when we have relationships with people, things happen and we just try to fling it off. We just try to forget it, whatever. And the more stuff you can just fling out, the better, right? Because don't sweat the small stuff, is what they say. And that's true. There's just ain't nobody got time for that. You know what I'm saying? Just fling all that stuff out. But if it keeps boomeranging back and landing in your yard, and you try to fling it out again because you really don't want to think about it, you don't want to do anything about it, you don't want to talk about it, God forbid. So you just keep flinging it out, and it keeps boomeranging back and landing in your yard. Well, if you go out in your front yard and you have boomerangs in your yard, you need to pick that up and you need to attach words to it and walk across your yard to your fence line, where your fence line is pressing into your abdomen, and speak your words to your neighbor and tell your neighbor, I just want you to know, the other day we had a conversation and you said something about my child. And I didn't really like that very much. I felt like you were sort of insulting my child, or felt like you didn't really like something was going on. And I was wondering if we could just like talk more about that a minute, because maybe I misunderstood you, or maybe I didn't, I don't know, but it's been kind of bothering me. And I just kind of want to open up a conversation to talk about it. That's, if you're upset about that, then that's your responsibility to attach words to that and create a bridge to talk to the other person. Now, I will say, when you do that, how the person receives what you say and how they respond back to what you say is not in your yard.
Right.
Okay. They may not like what you said. They may respond back with vitriol. They may respond back with some sassiness, or they may hold a grudge for months. Okay. That's not your stuff. That's not your monkeys. That's not your circus.
Right.
You pay attention to your own yard. If they want to hold a grudge, okay, well, you want to hear something funny?
Yes.
one of my favorite things to do, because people that hold grudges, they're passive aggressive. They don't want to address you verbally, but they like poke sticks at you under the table, so to say.
Mhm.
Like if you pass them in the hallway, they give you that look, you know, and they don't say anything. They just, and so they're trying to convey with their actions that they're upset, but they don't want to attach words to it. You see, that's passive aggression. One of my favorite things to do is to totally ignore their actions and act like we're just fine. It's hysterical. Like when they come at you and they're like, got that sour face and going like that. And you go, hey, how are you today? And they're going, they don't want to talk to you, right? So they're just, and you're going, you know what? I had a great day today. Let me tell you all about my day. Well, first I went to the store, and they're just going, they practically become apoplectic because they don't want to talk to you. And you're just totally ignoring all of their passive aggressive stuff, which you have a right to do because it's not yours.
Yeah.
You're not owning that.
It's true. It's a great way. I mean, you're focusing on you're living life, and you're letting them, if they want to say what's bothering them, they can use their words as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
But some people don't. Sometimes they have issues. Maybe they don't know about boundaries, or they have past things going on and they don't have the right coping strategies. So we need to have a little bit of understanding and grace for people that are acting that way. And that's one of the great things about boundaries is you don't have to own their stuff. If they're holding a grudge against you, that's not your grudge. That's their grudge.
Sure.
It takes energy to hold a grudge.
It really does.
And if you think like of a mental pie, like a pie that you have in your head of emotional energy, you have so many slices to go around to deal with your life. Well, if you're going to be holding a grudge against somebody and just holding it, that takes quite a few slices of your pie that you're constantly having to allocate toward holding that grudge. So the rest of your pie is a fraction that you have to deal with the rest of your things in life that you would have if you weren't holding a grudge. Yeah. So it's not a smart choice.
Yeah. Why waste your energy?
Exactly. Nope.
So it sounds like the majority of boundary problems comes down to communication, feeling like you can speak what's on your mind, sharing it to those who are in your world, and having the courage to say, you know what, it's okay if I share what I really want.
Yes, because if you lived on an island, then you wouldn't have to worry about boundaries. Okay.
That's true.
You're just, the only people that have to worry about boundaries or that have to consider boundaries are those of us who happen to be in relationships with other human beings. That's all. So
that's it.
That's it. Yeah. So it's very much a relational issue, a communication issue.
So when someone's working on creating boundaries and saying something, are there any tips that you can give people, just like a couple tips, like write down what you want to say? Or is there anything specific that seems to work with people to get them to enforce a boundary or set a boundary?
Okay. Well, the first thing I would say is always refer back to your yard. In your yard are your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, all of which you have a right to. Okay. They're yours. So, and what's not in your yard, other people's thoughts, other people's feelings, other people's actions are not yours to deal with. Okay. So because you have to figure out which, is this in my yard or is this in your yard? Because if it's in my yard, I need to take responsibility and do something with it. But if it's someone else's yard, now I will have, when you're doing this though, to those that are just kind of baby boundary setters, especially if you're adults, you've trained people to this point to expect you to not have healthy boundaries. Okay. It's important to keep that in mind. If we have a relationship with someone and there's a pattern that has developed over time and we don't like it, then we need to somewhat look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what are we doing to participate in this interaction? Because we're involved in this relationship. We're not totally responsible for everything by any means, but we're responsible for our part, even if that means enabling somebody to be hateful, allowing someone to treat us disrespectfully, to dismiss our thoughts and feelings, to bully us with their anger. we have allowed that. And I consider that, I want to say, a good thing, because the more that we can identify that's in our yard, that is our responsibility, the better, because that's the stuff we get to use to change, to have, that's what we have control over.
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of people want to point fingers and, well, it's not my fault. If he only, if she only, if he only, if she only, well, I'm not arguing that. Okay. But I'm saying all that stuff's in somebody else's yard and you don't have any control over that. So you need to identify what are your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, because that's the stuff you can change.
Okay.
But when you start changing it, because you've trained them up to this point that you're going to react a certain kind of way, when you change that, they're going to be surprised, and not pleasantly surprised, usually. Okay. So expect that and have some grace, because you participated in that training. All right. So, and we can own that. We can, because this part of all of this is not judging ourselves. I'm huge on not judging. We don't judge because it doesn't help anything. It doesn't help anything at all. But what does help is observing. If we take off that judgment cloak and hang it on the hook on the wall, so we're just observing our own behavior. We're not judging it. We're just observing it. Then we don't get defensive.
Right.
So we can just observe, yeah, I know when in the past, when this guy or this woman has approached me a certain kind of way, this is how I've responded. So now I've trained them to expect this kind of response from me. And we can own that, because we're not judging. We're not trying to make ourselves feel bad, jump in the shame shower. We're not trying to do any of that. Okay.
Yeah.
So when we begin to shift, we expect that they're going to be surprised. And like I said, not pleasantly surprised. And usually what happens is they try to turn up the flame to see what it's going to take to get us to go back to the way we were before.
Okay.
So in terms of a tip, once you kind of decide what you're going to do, be like a metronome, like a metronome. All right. Decide what you're going to do, decide where your boundaries are, decide what you're going to do. And you might need to seek some help from some family and friends when you start to do this, because you're going to need some comfort, because you're going to feel kind of wounded and you're going to feel like, so you're going to need some nurturing. Take tiny baby steps. I would suggest maybe trying out your boundaries on people that are more calm.
Okay.
The people that aren't likely to come at you with claws and fangs. Okay.
Reactive.
Yes. So try it out on people that are your friends or your family members that love you. Just kind of try out, because you're kind of working on your little baby teeth, and so work it out with them first.
Okay.
Try out some little baby nose or baby boundaries. And then once you do that and you kind of get your feet underneath you a little bit, then you can venture out to the people that you anticipate are going to respond with a little more vitriol.
Got it.
Okay. And when they do, and expect it, because why wouldn't they? All right. Yeah. You've trained them that you would react the other way. And when you don't, they don't like it, because it doesn't serve them very well when you have your boundaries. So when they react, that's not about you. Yeah. That reaction is not about you. That's their emotion.
Okay.
And if they try to turn up the flame and see what it's going to take, if they yell louder or try to put the screws in some other kind of way, don't make your behavior contingent upon their behavior. Okay. You have already decided what you're going to do, and you do it like a metronome. Okay. And it doesn't matter what they do. Your behavior is not contingent upon their response.
Right.
You've already decided what your behavior is going to be, because you've thought about it ahead of time. You've sought out wise counsel from friends and family. You've already decided that. So you put that in motion, and when they react some kind of way, you just keep doing it like a metronome, like behavior modification. Da-da, ta-da. And what they do, how they respond, becomes somewhat irrelevant.
Okay. That sounds amazing. That's a great way and a great analogy too, to help people just be consistent and keep at it, because there's so much resistance. The nervous system, everything wants to resist and take you back into your old habits. So you need to have all the support you can get.
Yeah. And when you're, like we said earlier, your body is going to respond.
Yeah.
So when expect your heart to start beating faster, Don't be surprised when it does that. Your body's
Yeah.
kind of freaking out a little bit too, and so give it a moment. I mean, have some understanding for your body, because it's trying to flip into fight or flight, and it's scared. And so, but see, the thing of it is, you have a part of your brain where the amygdala and hippocampus are. It's kind of like the emotional center of your brain, and it learns through experience. It does not learn from logic. So you can't explain to yourself, like, okay, now I'm going to set a boundary and they're going to get mad, but I'm going to be like a metronome. That part of your brain doesn't hear that at all. It's like if I sat here and started spouting Russian, okay, it doesn't hear that. What that part of your brain does respond to is experience. So when you actually set a boundary with someone, and your body is going to be, your heart's going to be racing hard, you're going to be sweating in the pits and all that kind of stuff. You might get blotchy on your neck and everything. Let it happen, okay? But just keep doing it. And that experience that you actually can do it, and your body's not going to explode into 65 pieces, okay? You're teaching that part of your brain that you actually can do it. So then when you move forward, you will not be kicked into fight or flight as much. And then it will significantly come down, because that part of your brain that's kicking you into fight or flight has learned that you can actually set a boundary and not be blown away into 65 pieces by someone else's anger about it.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's a great way to go about that. And I hope people take advantage of this and really implement that, because it'd be great to have people communicating better and saying what's on their mind, setting those boundaries. So really appreciate this. And is there a way that people can get a hold of you if they want to work with you?
Okay, let's see. There's a few ways, actually. Well, so I have private practice, but it's like I'm overloaded with that. I've got months, like 4 months waiting list. It's kind of crazy. That's danaskaggs.com.
Okay.
But my if you go to phoenixandflame.com, that's where all of my podcasts are sitting. That's where all the episodes from podcasts are sitting. You can connect with me on the contact me page through there. And I also have just started. It's called The Boundaries Queen. I literally went on Amazon and bought a crown just for fun, but I put them on YouTube. It's like little YouTube videos, just about 8 to 10 minutes long, that I address individual boundary issues, and I kind of deconstruct them and then rebuild them in a healthy way. And so if somebody wanted to go to any of those videos on YouTube, and you can in the comment section, if you have any kind of a specific issue, like a specific boundary problem that they don't really know what to do with, put a comment in there, and I'll work it into one of the Boundaries Queen videos or something like that.
Okay. That sounds wonderful. And you'll have to send me that link so I can put it in the show notes. That'd be great.
Okay. Sure thing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us this weekend. Really appreciate it. It's such great information, and hope people will take advantage and start watching your YouTube channel and just even reach out to you. That would be great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you all for joining us today. It was a great conversation. We will see you again next week. Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye now.